Fighting clutter is like fighting weeds. The rider is always slightly behind. New varieties sprout overnight, and by noon they are part of American speech. Consider what President Nixon's aide John Dean accomplished in just one day of testimony on television during the Watergate hearings. The next day, everyone in America was saying, "at this point in time," instead of now. Consider all the prepositions that are draped onto verbs that don't need any help. We no longer head committees, we head them up. We don't face problems anymore. We face up to them when we can free up a few minutes. A small detail, you may say, not worth bothering about. It is worth bothering about. Writing improves in direct ratio to the number of things we can keep out of it that shouldn't be there. Up and free up shouldn't be there. Examine every word you put on paper. You'll find a surprising number that don't serve any purpose. Take the adjective personal, as in a personal friend of mine, his personal feeling, or her personal physician. It's typical of hundreds of words that can be eliminated. The personal friend has come into the language to distinguish him or her from the business friend, thereby debasing both language and friendship. Someone's feelings is that person's personal feeling. That's what his means. As for the personal physician, that's the man or woman summoned to the dressing room of a stricken actress so she won't have to be treated by the impersonal physician assigned to the theater. Someday I'd like to see that person identified as her doctor. Physicians are physicians. Friends are friends. The rest is clutter. Clutter is the laborious phrase that has pushed out the short word that means the same thing. Even before John Dean, people and businesses had stopped saying now. They were saying currently. All our operators are currently assisting other customers. Or at the present time. Or presently, which means soon. Yet the idea can always be expressed by now, to mean the immediate moment. Now I can see him. Or by today, to mean the historical present. Today prices are high. Or simply by the verb to be. It is raining. There's no need to say, at the present time we are experiencing precipitation. Experiencing is one of the worst clutterers. Even your dentist will ask if you are experiencing any pain. If he had his own kid in the chair, he would say, "Does it hurt?" He would, in short, be himself. By using a more pompous phrase in his professional role, he not only sounds more important, he blunts the painful edge of truth. It's the language of the flight attendant demonstrating the oxygen mask that will drop down if the plane should run out of air. In the unlikely possibility that the aircraft should experience such an eventuality, she begins, a phrase so oxygen depriving in itself that we are prepared for any disaster. Clutter is the ponderous euphemism that turns a slum into a depressed socioeconomic area, garbage collectors into waste disposal personnel, and the town dumped into the volume reduction unit. I think of Bill Malden's cartoon of two hobos riding a freight car. One of them says, "I started as a simple bum, but now I'm hardcore unemployed." Clutter is political correctness gone amok. I saw an ad for a boys' camp designed to provide individual attention for the minimally exceptional. Clutter is the official language used by corporations to hide their mistakes. When the Digital Equipment Corporation eliminated 3,000 jobs, its statement didn't mention layoffs. Those were involuntary methodologies. When an Air Force missile crashed, it impacted with the ground prematurely. When General Motors had a plant shut down, that was a volume-related production schedule adjustment. Companies that go belly up have a negative cash flow position. Clutter is the language of the Pentagon calling an invasion a reinforced protection reaction strike, and justifying its vast budgets on the need for counter-force deterrence. As George Orwell pointed out in Politics in the English Language, an essay written in 1946 but often cited during the wars in Cambodia, Vietnam, and Iraq, political speech and writing are largely the defense of the indefensible. Thus, political language has to consist largely of euphemism, question-begging, and sheer cloudly vagueness. Orwell's warning that clutter is not just a nuisance, but a deadly tool has come true in the recent decades of American military adventurism. It was during George W. Bush's presidency that civilian casualties in Iraq became collateral damage. Verbal camouflage reached new heights during General Alexander Haig's tenure as President Reagan's Secretary of State. Before Haig, nobody had thought of saying, at this juncture of maturization, to mean now. He told the American people that terrorism could be fought with meaningful sanctuary teeth, and that intermediate nuclear missiles were at the vortex of cruciality. As for any worries that the public might harbor, his message was, leave it to Allah. Although what he actually said was, we must push this to a lower decibel of public fixation. I don't think there's much of a learning curve to be achieved in this area of content. I could go on quoting examples from various fields. Every profession has its growing arsenal of jargon to throw dust in the eyes of the populace. But the list would be tedious. The point of raising it now is to serve notice that clutter is the enemy. Beware, then, of the long word that's no better than the short word. Assistance, help. Numerous, many. Facilitate, ease. Individual, man or woman. Remainder, rest. Initial, first. Implement, do. Sufficient, enough. Attempt, try. Referred to as, called, and hundreds more. Beware of all the slippery new fad words. Paradigm and parameter, prioritize and potentialize. They are all weeds that will smother what you write. Don't dialogue with someone you can talk to. Don't interface with anybody. Just as insidious are all the word clusters with which we explain how we propose to go about our explaining. I might add, it should be pointed out. It is interesting to note. If you might add it. If it should be pointed out, point it out. If it is interesting to note, make it interesting. Are we not all stupefied by what follows when someone says, this will interest you? Don't inflate what needs no inflating, with the possible exception of, except, due to the fact that, because, he totally lacked the ability to, he couldn't, until such time as, until, for the purpose of, for. Is there any way to recognize clutter at a glance? Here's a device my students at Yale found helpful. I would put brackets around every component in a piece of writing that wasn't doing useful work. Often just one word got bracketed, the unnecessary preposition appended to a verb, order up, or the adverb that carries the same meaning as the verb, smile happily, or the adjective that states a known fact, tall skyscraper. Often my brackets surrounded the little qualifiers that weaken any sentence they inhabit, a bit, sort of, or phrases like, in a sense, which don't mean anything. Sometimes my brackets surrounded an entire sentence, the one that essentially repeats what the previous sentence said, or that's something readers don't need to know or can figure out for themselves. Most first drafts can be cut by 50% without losing any information or losing the author's voice. My reason for bracketing the students' superfluous words instead of crossing them out was to avoid violating their sacred prose. I wanted to leave the sentence intact for them to analyze. I was saying, I may be wrong, but I think this can be deleted and the meaning won't be affected. But you decide. Read the sentence without the bracketed material and see if it works. In the early weeks of the term, I handed back papers that were festooned with brackets. Entire paragraphs were bracketed. But soon the students learned to put mental brackets around their own clutter, and by the end of the term their papers were almost clean. Today, many of those students are professional writers, and they tell me, "I still see your brackets. They're following me through life." You can develop the same eye. Look for the clutter in your writing and prune it ruthlessly. Be grateful for everything you can throw away. Re-examine each sentence you put on paper. Is every word doing new work? Can any thought be expressed with more economy? Is anything pompous or pretentious or faddish? Are you hanging on to something useless just because you think it's beautiful? Simplify, simplify.